Hey guys, this is Justice coming back at you with another review for the new film, The Gorge. The plot follows two highly trained operatives who are appointed to posts in guard towers on opposite sides of a vast and highly classified gorge, protecting the world from mysterious evil that lurks within. They work together to keep the secret in the gorge. That's about all I'm gonna say without getting into any spoilers. This is gonna be the spoiler-free section of the video, and much like my other video, I will warn you guys when the spoilers are coming up ahead. First off, I wanted to apologize that I didn't get the Final Destination review out yet. I couldn't really pass up this one. I mean, my last video I said that I'm a huge Anya Taylor-Joy fan, and this movie I didn't even know it was coming out, and it's new to Apple Plus, and I couldn't help myself but watch it. And honestly, this film proved to be yet again another one that she has been in that I have very much enjoyed. And whoever her agent is, holy crap, they get her like all of the best roles. And I swear to God that this channel isn't going to become a jerk-off session for Anya Taylor-Joy, even though I could go on and on and on about so many movies that I love her in. Like, Split was one of the very first that I had ever seen and was simply iconic, and I can't help but love how she portrayed that follow-up in Glass, though brief, was still phenomenal and amazing. She owned the screen the entire time and was the wittiest, the funniest one. She kept me glued to the screen and helped me finish. The Witch, though very much a slow burn, Last Night in Soho became one of my all-time favorite movies.
I get it!
I'm not going to spend this whole video fangirling over her yet again, but I will say that in this film, she does an amazing job. Another actor who is in this film is Miles Teller, and though I hadn't heard of him previously to this, my boyfriend knew exactly who he was, and just saying, this guy runs around the movie in many, many scenes with nothing but a tight tank top on, and just saying, chef's kiss daddy right there. He did a phenomenal job too, and him and Anya Taylor-Joy had amazing chemistry, which is something that's very much needed in this film, because not only is it this like action creature feature horror flick, it also has this romance subplot to it as well. Another big name that was in this film is Sigourney Weaver, and though she plays a smaller role, she does a very good job. I'm not going to get much into her until the spoilers, because I do think that if you haven't seen the trailer, then you should go into this film blind on what it is about. I watched the trailer before I saw the movie. My boyfriend didn't, and I think he got a better experience from not seeing the trailer, but I will admit that the trailer didn't give away the whole movie. I was really impressed by the fact that it didn't show the designs of the creature in the trailers at all, and that was something that I found to be a welcome surprise. It also didn't show what the gorge looks like in the trailer either, which I thought was a very smart choice and left me guessing at many points of the movie still. So if you haven't seen the trailer, but you're interested in the plot synopsis I just gave, then I would say just go watch it. It's a really good movie, and it's just a fun action flick. And if you like romance too, like, there you go. And the horror effects, when you do get to them, are very good and top-notch. There were even a couple parts where they kind of made me scream a little bit, and I will get to those in the spoiler section. With that out of the way, we're just going to jump straight into the spoilers. Now, Anya Taylor-Joy plays the character of Dasa, and Miles Teller plays the character of Levi, and the two of them are these, like, pro snipers, essentially, that work for the military. Dasa works for the Russian government, while Levi works for the American government. They are both tasked, essentially, to sit at these two watchtowers that are standing at opposing sides of this gorge that's huge, and they are meant to stay there for a year. You see from Levi's perspective that when they come to the gorge, that he is introduced to the last soldier that had to stay there for a year to take care of it and keep whatever creatures are at the bottom of the gorge down there at any means necessary. They're given bombs, they're given guns, like full-on machine guns, to shoot these creatures so that they don't come up, and they have no clue what they are. Even the last guy who was watching didn't know what they were. Levi takes over for this man. He ends up getting picked up by the helicopter, and almost immediately after, as he's getting picked up, he gets shot in the head as they thank him for his service. That ended up being one of the more shocking scenes to me that really caught me off guard. It very much made sense to me too once you realize, as they're explaining, that not even the presidents of either Russia or the US even know about the gorge, that it's hidden by these cloakers, that it's this like top secret military thing, and it's been kept on the down low for a very, very long time. They are both told that they aren't supposed to interact with the other side, that they are supposed to stay and sit watch, and that any contact with the other side is forbidden. But eventually they start using their binoculars, and they write on whiteboards and notepads to be able to write signs for each other, to talk to one another. And it is the cutest thing, and immediately made me think of that Taylor Swift music video, You Belong With Me.
You said she doesn't get your humor like I do.
I can't help but throw a gay reference in every video, I'm sorry. They also are doing all these really cutesy couple things. At one point, they do target practice at different items at other sides, since they're both pro snipers. At another point, it's her birthday, and he parties with her essentially, even though they couldn't be farther apart in that moment. During Christmas time, he lights up this like makeshift tree for her, and they even build snowmen for each other. And they also play chess with one another, which Anya Taylor-Joy beats him, which that's a given. The bitch was in the Queen's Gambit. Like, what more could you expect? I will say, though, as the film goes on, the romance is very top-notch. You're very much rooting for these characters. Eventually, Levi goes across the gorge to go see her, and he ends up falling into it. And this is about where the trailer cuts off, which I was worried was giving away a lot, but there was still like an hour of the movie left. So I think they did a really good job, like, keeping that low-key on what happens once they go down there, because she rushes down to go save him. And that's when I think this movie truly becomes the horror like masterpiece that it is, because previously to this, we'd seen a couple scenes of them fighting off the creatures at night as they're trying to climb up the walls of this gorge. They're like shooting them down with these machine guns, as I mentioned earlier. There's these bombs rigged to the sides of the gorge that knock them down. You don't really get like a good look at them until they actually go into the gorge. And the creatures are noted as being the Hollow Men because they lack the humanity of being a man, I think they said. Don't quote me on that, though. One of the things that gave me the heebie-jeebies while watching this, and I really wish I could find a clip for it because I would clip it in right here, but I don't feel comfortable illegally ripping this off of Apple. But there's this scene after he falls in where his parachute gets tangled up into a tree, and there's this giant mutated centipede that starts crawling at him, and he shoots at it to kill it. And then he ends up cutting his ropes on his parachute and then falls down to this tree, and the roots smash into pieces and blood starts pouring out of them. And then these bones start coming out of the ground to pull him in. And it's like an adhesive is all over his body, and it's pulling him down closer and closer to the ground. Dasa ends up making it, though, just in time to get him out of it. And this is about the part where we start seeing more of what the creatures look like. They're riding around on these deformed horses. And the best way I can describe them, because again, I don't have any clips I can show of them, is they looked a lot like Davy Jones's men in the second Pirates of the Caribbean film. Just ignore the fact that these creatures aren't wet, because they're not in the ocean like those guys. There's all these really cool set pieces once they make it into the gorge too. They have one where they end up going to this, like, it looks like a graveyard is the best way that I could describe it. It's all these different skeletal pieces that are sticking up out of the ground, and they almost look like trees in a way. And then they also end up going to this church shortly after the fact that's overgrown with all this different, like, very demonic looking shrubbery, and they constantly make references to how this is like the end of times and that this is hell on earth. And when they go inside this church, it's filled with all these dead people who had taken cyanide pills to kill themselves so that they didn't become whatever these creatures were. And it was at this point in the film that it very much started feeling like one of the dark picture anthology games to me, if you've ever played any of those. Specifically, House of Ashes, where in that game too, they get stuck in this cavern and there's these weird creatures that are coming after them. And even more so, I felt this comparison as the movie continued, because just like in that game, if you get infected by one of the creatures, you become one of them. And that gets revealed in this film as well. As they're searching the gorge, they end up finding this laboratory that has this old tape of this scientist back in the 1940s discussing how this all happened. How it was this weapon that they were making for biochemical warfare, and something went wrong, and the toxins from it were unleashed on everyone there, and they were trying to keep it contained to the gorge as they were being infected with whatever toxins were inside of it, and it was turning them into the creatures, which eventually, obviously, it didn't work. And now either opposing sides of the government that had been working together are trying to cover this up so that everybody doesn't find out about it, because part of the reason that they created this biochemical weapon was to create a super soldier that could take any damage whatsoever. They kill one of the creatures and they find this army suit on him that's from the 1940s. This is one of those moments in a movie where I'm not blaming her for what she says. I'm blaming the dialogue. It's one of the few nitpicks I have, and I hate when movies do this. Levi points out how old the suit is and how that must be one of the soldiers. And she makes the comment of they'd be long dead by now. And I absolutely hate when movies like this pull shit like that, especially when the characters already know what's going on. Like, at this point in the film, they've already been killing these creatures for months, trying to keep them in the gorge. So it makes no sense for her to have to be convinced that that's what's happening at all. In fact, I think it just makes her seem stupider than like what she actually is. From that video, they also discover that the fog that's in the gorge is what infects you, and if you're down there for only a few hours, you can become infected with it as well. So it becomes a rush for both Dasa and Levi to escape the gorge even quicker so they don't end up becoming one of those creatures. They also learn that they won't even know for sure whether or not they're infected after they leave, because for 5 days they have to quarantine after leaving the gorge. That's something that I would say is a major point for this film. I keep mentioning all these set pieces. There's all these like really good action scenes. I'm not the biggest fan of action movies personally, but when they're done well, they're done very well. And there was one particular scene where Dasa is fighting one of the creatures, and I couldn't help but think of Sucker Punch with like all the over-the-top visuals. As she's trying to fight the Hollow Man with this metal rod, he has this sword, and they're doing all these badass moves and choreographed flips and like attacks, and it just looks phenomenal to me. And that was the first film that came to mind when I was seeing it. Eventually though, when they go to escape the gorge, they find this Jeep and they pull it up the side of the gorge wall with this pulley system from the rope that Levi had fallen from in the first place that had caused them to go down. And this is yet another one of those amazing action scenes, because as they're going up, all these creatures are climbing up after them and they're fighting them off, almost falling off this sideways Jeep that's climbing up this hill. Like, it's literally a 90-degree angle, but they do eventually make it to the top. And at this point, they still have to quarantine for 5 days to figure out whether or not they became infected. And I convinced myself that one of them was going to be infected and that one of them was going to die, especially because there was perfect foreshadowing leading up to that made me think that that was going to happen, because Levi is a poet and he wrote a poem about Dasa, and he tells her that he's not going to show it to her, that he's not comfortable doing that. And it becomes this little running thing between the two of them that's really cute, where she keeps like making digs at him about like whether or not he's going to show her his poem, but he never actually does. So my thought process was that he was going to die and she was going to like finally read the poem, or he was going to tell her it as he was dying, which thankfully didn't end up happening, but we'll get to that in a minute. I'm gonna go back and talk about Sigourney Weaver's character, because she's not really a powerful force in the movie until this final act. You see bits and pieces of her at the beginning of the film as she's assigning Levi to take over the tower at the Gorge, but beyond that, you don't see much of her. It isn't until they escape the Gorge that we actually see her again, and she questions him about whether or not he's been with Dasa and if he's made contact with her, or if he's been down to the Gorge, which he lies about. But they have drones and security cameras, and they can see everything. So without even telling him, though, she gives him the orders to eliminate her, that she's been compromised, and he tells her that he's going to. Him and Dasa aren't naive, and neither is Sigourney Weaver's character, because she immediately plans on going down there the next day to take them all out and eliminate the both of them. Levi and Dasa, though, plan ahead for this because they know that something's up. The day that Sigourney Weaver arrives with all of the Marines, before they get there, both Dasa and Levi rig all the cloakers that are hiding the Gorge from satellites and everyone with explosives. And as they're searching the towers, Dasa and Levi are waiting at a safe distance where they can't see them. It's at this moment they have another one of their little Taylor Swift moments and are sending signs to each other over the Gorge. Then finally, they blow up the cloakers, which causes a nuke that's at the bottom of the Gorge to go off. Sigourney Weaver rushes with the military men into her helicopter, and they try to avoid the blast, and it ends up sucking them in, killing all their characters. And I have to say, though her appearance in this film was very, very brief, she did a really good job at playing this villainous bitch, which I don't really think is much of a surprise. I mean, who doesn't know that Sigourney Weaver has some serious acting chops? But this explosion destroys everything in the Gorge, and all the creatures that were inhabiting it are gone now, because the whole reason they were keeping it around was to attempt to still create that super soldier to use them for scientific experiments so that they could maybe rectify what went wrong with the science originally. But, like, who cares about the lives that get lost in between then and there, right? Levi gets pushed into the river after the explosion as Dasa looks back and fears the worst, that he has died. She goes to where they agreed to wait for one another at, because their plan was to meet up so that the two of them could go to France, because Dasa has a place that would be good for the both of them. And it's at this time that there's this letter that he's given her that he says for her to read if he doesn't make it there by sundown. He doesn't get there, so she reads the poem and ends up leaving. It flashes to months later. She's living in France, working at this diner, and it's presumed that Levi's dead, but as she's working, she sees him sitting at this table, and before she can even say anything, he pulls out a sign to show it to her. The film ends with the two of them hugging, kissing, sharing some banter, and then the credits roll, giving us a happy ending. This film was a really good movie. I was surprised how much I ended up liking it. What ended up surprising me even more so was the fact that this is a direct-to-streaming film. I would have much preferred to see this movie on the big screen. That's one thing that frustrates me about these streaming releases, because one, they're not going to get a physical media release, and two, it takes away the enjoyment of seeing these like big cinematic movies on the big screen. That's something that's frustrating, is that gets taken away from us with all these really good movies that get shoved onto these streaming services, whether it be the new Hellraiser, Bird Box, It's What's Inside. Like, it's all these really good movies that live on these streaming services, and two, furthermore, you don't know how long they're going to stay on these streaming services for, because now there's films like Hush, which was originally a Netflix original, now floats in limbo because Netflix doesn't have the rights anymore, even though it was their product, which makes no sense to me. I just absolutely hate the way that movies are set up now, to where you don't actually own anything, and it goes for music and everything. But that's a rant for a different day. But if you have Apple TV, I 100% say go watch this movie. You're not going to regret it. It is a really good film with amazing performances, amazing special effects, and amazing action scenes. Anyways, that's going to do it for this video. I hope you guys enjoyed it. If you want to see more content like this and my future videos, my next video for sure is going to be on the second Final Destination film. I'm doing a series on those building up to the newest installment, Final Destination Bloodlines. So if you're curious to see that stuff, just click the subscribe button right down below and you can see more content like this. That video, I'm hoping, is going to get released sometime later this week, if not the beginning of next week. And other than that, this is Justice, and I hope to see you on the next one. Take care.